man. We got another caller, and you don't have to leave God TV. We got Dr. Alpha in the house. Welcome, my brother. You are on the mic with Mav. What's going on, my brother? How are you?
Pretty good. What about you?
I'm good, man. How can I help you?
Yeah, so you said that atheism fails. In what way?
In every conceivable way.
Okay, like what ways? Can you describe for me?
Well, just in and of itself, that you guys believe that you believe that the universe came into existence. How? Let's just start there. How do you believe the universe came into existence?
Yeah, but me not knowing doesn't mean that there has to be a God.
It absolutely does, because we have intelligent design. And the more that science progresses, the more that we see that it's impossible that we came together just by random chance. Any more than
Yeah, but if we like form some sort of argument that if the universe did have a beginning and we don't know what the beginning is, that doesn't mean that it necessitates that God is the person who created the universe.
Correct.
May I ask our guest a question?
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I believe your name's Dr. Alpha, this name you go under.
Right.
Do you believe that the universe is rational and logical, and that's the reason why science can study it?
What do you mean by rational?
Rational and logical in the sense that it's coherent, that we can actually study it and do science based upon it.
Right, it is coherent.
So you do believe that the universe is rational and logical?
Yes, if you're just using it's a coherent concept.
Right.
Yeah.
Rationality and logic require a mind. Thank you.
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
It does. You can't get logic and rationality out of an inanimate
Okay, so
object.
how would you like form some sort of argument that would
Hold
establish
on. Let me interject real quick. God TV asked the legitimate question. Dr. Alpha, this is exactly why people say what they say about the atheist movement, because he gave you an intelligent statement and you replied with, no, it doesn't. And then you have absolutely no evidence.
It doesn't necessitate.
So explain how it does not necessitate, and give us an example.
Yes, basically we could just put this in a syllogism if you want. Like if it's just going to be the case that the conclusion is going to be intelligibility requires some sort of creator, then it's going to be the case that that's not going to be a valid argument, simply because if we structure it such as if it is the case that a being is intelligent, then it's going to be the case that a coherent design is going to come out of them. That's not going to follow.
You mind if I ask another
please,
question?
Please go ahead, because I don't even know where to begin.
To like what I just said, like if you want evidence for your claim, you should actually like form some sort of valid syllogism at least.
Okay, so here, then I'll do that. All right, your response literally fails on both logic and philosophy. You literally talked yourself. So here's what we do on my show. When somebody's talking, you do the polite thing and you stop talking, and then when I'm done talking, I'll let you know that I yield back to you and you start talking. Okay, that's how it works here. Okay,
go ahead.
So your response literally is a failure epically on logic and philosophy, because you completely misunderstand the argument. The argument from intelligibility isn't intelligent beings produce coherent design. That intelligibility itself presupposes a rational source. I don't even understand how you don't understand that. You can't even make sense of logic, math, or science without assuming a universe ordered by consistent laws, which don't arise from chaos or randomness. Never. We've never seen that in human history, but atheists want you to believe that, again, a universe ordered by consistent laws came from chaos, and all of a sudden, as billions of years pass by, because supposedly it was just enough time that passed by, suddenly life came from non-life and order arose from chaos. But again, that does not happen from chaos or randomness. An atheist philosopher, okay, and again, I emphasize to you that he was an atheist philosopher by the name of Thomas Nagel, admitted, and quote, "It is difficult to understand how there could be a purely physical explanation of the phenomenon of consciousness or rationality." So I yield back to you. Go and when I say I yield back, I want you to address what I said and only what I said. And if you know more than Thomas Nagel, please go ahead and demonstrate it for us.
Yeah, so basically it's going to be the case that you said that the argument from order is just going to be based on some sort of truth, that it is the case that, just to be clear, I'm just clarifying.
Sure.
It is the case that rationality exists, therefore God exists, because rationality presupposes that there has to be some sort of intelligent designer, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how exactly would you form some sort of valid argument that rationality implies that there has to be some sort of rational creator?
Because where else would rationality come from?
Once again, that's just begging the question. That's just not even making any sense whatsoever. Just because you don't have some sort of answer to it doesn't mean that the answer is going to be therefore God.
Well, that's the thing, is that you continue, and just like so many other atheists out there, think that your rhetoric and repeating the same sound bites makes you sound more intelligent, but it doesn't. because you say, well, we don't know, but therefore God. But we know that it is obvious that design requires an intelligent mind. Any more than looking at the Mona Lisa is not going to say, well, I think one day a paint factory exploded and damn, we had the Mona Lisa. That's essentially what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that you don't have some sort of valid argument for why it's the case that it would necessitate God's existence.
Okay.
But it's funny that you talk about consistency because God does have contradictory traits.
Such as?
Him being non-physical and also having the property of creation.
Okay. So what you're saying is that a non-physical being cannot exist, cannot interact with a physical universe.
No, I'm saying that it is the case that if there's some sort of being that is non-physical, then it's also the case that it cannot be subject to physical changes. God subjected himself to physical changes when he was creating the universe, so that would just lead to a contradiction.
How would it lead to a contradiction?
Yeah, so you can't not subject yourself to something and also subject yourself to something, right?
So you and I cannot. God, the creator of the universe, can do what he wants.
Wait, so
you
God
try
can
to
undergo contradiction?
you try to impose limitation on God because we have limitations imposed on us. But here, let me address what you said originally, because you're like all over the place. Your premise is that rationality and logical laws are real and they're immaterial and they're universal and they're invariant. That's basically, would you agree with that?
Are you talking about just the laws of logic and rationality?
Right. So rationality and logical laws are real, right? If they're real, but they are also immaterial, you would also have to say that they're universal, right?
So I'm a physicalist. I think consciousness is just going to be a physical concept. When it comes to logic, I'm sort of agnostic on whether or not it's going to be a physical thing or not.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I would just grant that it's true. That's going to be immaterial.
Okay. So at the end of the day, this is where the counter fails, though, because atheism or agnosticism, regardless, cannot ground rationality. If your mind is just a chemical accident of evolution, then logic is reduced to basically neural fizz. The same as when you open a soda and it's fizzy. There was an atheist biologist, guys. His name is JBS Haldane, right? Says that if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true, and hence I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. So the thing about truth is that it affirms a mind, right? You said order is based on truth, but truth is a property of propositions, and propositions only exist in minds. But you can't have objective truth without an objective mind.
Oh yeah, so the first thing is I wanted to respond to what you said a couple of minutes ago. You said that it's going to be the case that God would, or the original argument was basically, it's not going to be a valid argument if you're just going to say rationality, therefore God. There's no sort of valid inference. There's multiple different other possibilities for some other source of rationality. Just because I can't name one or can't figure one out doesn't mean it's going to be the case that a God has to exist. Now I'm going to go back to the properties of creation and the properties of being non-physical. Those are going to lead to contradictions. Contradictions can occur. And also, if you said that logic requires rationality, no, that's not going to be the case, because logic and rationality and consciousness are going to be two entirely different concepts.
I was going to say, I don't understand. I've heard some atheists actually bring this up. If he's a mind and all that, then how can he physically alter the universe? The classic definition of God is he's all powerful, he's omniscient, omnipresent, all knowing. God repeatedly tells us in the biblical book, the holy text, that he can take physical manifestation. So when he has this attribute, why is there a contradiction if he can physically alter things, inclulling himself?
Right. Yep.
Right.
And,
so like,
and hold on, but also you said you hold on.
You cut me off, dude.
I know. No, hang on. I know, because I was gonna answer this, and I had God Logic say what he had to say. But you said that logic doesn't require rationality, right? But that's a complete fatal error, because logic is literally the formal structure of rationality. You use logic to reason. Rationality is the act. Logic is the tool, and both presuppose a conscious thinking agent. So when you say logic doesn't require rationality, that's completely false. And repeating something that's a lie over and over doesn't make it true. So go ahead.
Okay, let's just say you had like a toolbox, for example. You would say that the wrench still exists and it's not going to be dependent on your mind for it to exist, right? Like if your mind was completely erased, the toolbox wouldn't erase as well.
That's a completely false analogy. Logic and reason,
of course
one would not exist without the other. How would there be logic if there was no reason? How would there be rationality without logic? How would
because
there be...
you just admitted this. You said that logic was going to be a tool. If it's something that's going to be a tool, then it's also going to be the case it has the ability to not be dependent on the thing.
Which I'm sure you ignored, which both presuppose a conscious thinking agent, which I know
it doesn't.
Yeah, it actually does. Again, Dude, if you're gonna come on
And I
here
want to
and
respond
you're
to what God TV said, but you keep cutting me off, dog.
no, but
Okay, anyways, what God TV said was basically that God has physical manifestations in the Bible. Do you think it's true that God is an immaterial being? Yes or no?
I believe that God, in the original form that started the universe, he actually created the very matter, space, and time that exists, as where the atheist doesn't have any kind of alternative or option to sell on the table on this. Let me ask you a very
Is
simple
God
question.
immaterial?
Let me
Yes or no?
ask you a very simple question, because you've been aggressive.
No, you're not going to ask
you-
my question with a question. And you're not going
I'm
to answer my
asking-
question with a
Whoa,
question. You're
stop,
gonna
stop,
answer
stop,
my
hold
question.
on.
Is it the case that God is immaterial? Yes or
I've
no?
Hold on,
already
stop,
told,
stop, stop.
I've already, hello, sir. I've already told the audience and our host here that I believe that God has the ability to take physical form and manifestation. That was your answer. I'm sorry you don't like it. Now
So
back to my
is God
question. Back to my
is God
question. It's
immaterial?
my
Yes or
turn,
no?
sir. It's my turn now.
You didn't even answer the question. It was a yes or
I
no
did
question. You
answer
failed
your
to answer it.
question. Did
All right,
everybody
go ahead.
hear
Ask
me?
the question. I'll just entertain you. Go ahead.
Okay. Do you believe in the possibility or probability of a higher power or God?
Nope, because contradictions can occur.
Ah, okay. So that's all I wanted to know from you on that. So you're not
Right.
even
So now you
open
can answer
to
my
it.
question. Is God immaterial? Yes or no? Either one of you guys can answer this.
Go ahead, God TV. Tell him, give him your answer.
Well, I've already responded to
It's a
it.
yes or no.
I believe that God actually was immaterial whenever he was forming this, but I believe that the physical reality came to existence through matter, time, and space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, beautiful. And by immaterial, we just mean is independent of space and time, right?
Space, matter, and time. Space, matter, and time.
What is your consciousness and brain and mind made up of?
Physical things like chemicals and stuff like that. Once again, I
So
said it
you
was
believe?
physicalist, but now
So
let's
he
go back
was
to the
right.
contradictions.
Our host
Okay, so the
was right.
contradiction is just going to be
Hello?
derived. If it is the case that God is immaterial, then
was
it's also going to be the
absolutely
case.
correct. Then you're nothing more than an animated piece of meat, according to you. That's all you are. You don't transcend it.
Yeah, but we create our own meaning. That's the point of a mind, right? So once again, let's go back to your contradictions. You can go back to the contradictions if you want.
Oh, I
You can
see.
keep
Hold
spreading it if
on,
you
hold
want.
on, stop
It's not
here.
going to make you look better in the conversation,
Hey,
buddy.
hang on, let me stop. Dr. Alpha, first of all, do me a favor and respect. All right, you're on my show and you talk a lot, you talk a lot, you laugh a lot, you're extremely arrogant, and I've given you any number of people who are I would assume exponentially more intelligent than you. People who are atheists who have written publications, who have made statements that completely contradict what you say. And the way that you rebuttal things is by saying, nope, no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Now you think that
Yep.
you think that just because you say no, it's not, it makes it true. It just shows the world the petulance of the atheist movement, because you have no evidence, you have no rebuttals. You just think that saying no over and over, which is why my comment section is blowing up and laughing at you, because you think that saying no, it's not. And then you come up with these false, ridiculous analogies about a toolbox and a wrench when we're talking about logic and reason and how they propose a conscious mind, a conscious thinking mind, and you think that because you come up with some kindergarten grade analogy and then you start talking over a guy who clearly gave you an answer, but you don't know how to damn listen long enough. And this is exactly why I hate the concept of atheism, because you think that just because you have come to a conclusion that is what reality is. And even when I'm giving you statements that were made by people who share your worldview, your style of debate is to say, no, it's not. And then you want to move on to start asking questions. So if you're going to come in here, you're going to damn respect my show, or you can go somewhere else with that crap. You can offer solid rebuttals like a real man should do, or you can go somewhere else.
Okay, so first off, you said that I didn't give any rebuttals. Do you even remember the contradiction I put out?
You pointed out a contradiction and then you immediately pivoted to something else. You see what I'm saying? So at the end of the day,
but how are you going to say I don't give any rebuttals besides no, it's not, when I clearly gave an argument? You just don't even remember the argument.
So make your argument. Make your argument. Make your argument.
Yeah, I'm going to make the argument.
State it
You
out
keep cutting me
without.
off.
Okay, so make the argument. Without trying to ask questions and stop in the middle of asking this question. Make an intelligent argument like a real man and finish it through. Complete an idea.
Right. Okay. So basically, it's going to be the case that a being is non-physical, which you guys agreed to. That being cannot be subject to physical changes. So therefore, it's just going to be a contradiction if it utilizes the property of creation, right?
May I respond?
Yes.
I don't think either one of us said anything like that. I
Nope.
believe that I said that God is a mind. He has
Okay, maybe we can do
intelligence,
this another
and
time.
also that he
Thank
can
you.
actually become a physical manifestation.
So it sounds like he left. And you know what? I heard somebody talking in the background and he left. And going back to what Alpha was saying earlier, he continued to make the insinuation, and I know what he was trying to do. He's doing what most atheists try to do, and they try to come in and ask questions to try to get these gotcha moments because they say that something is true and therefore it is true. Absolutely not. And I'm sorry if anybody was offended, but I talk to people exactly the way they need to be talked to. And if when you're going to act like a child, I will discipline you like a child. But his claim was that an immaterial God could not interact with the material universe, and if he could, then it's a contradiction, right? So then when people say stuff like that to you guys, I want you to remember this and say to them, then by your logic, your immaterial mind should not be able to lift your material hand, right? Because you're here typing and your argument self-destructs right away. Why? Because it assumes without proving that interaction between immaterial and material is impossible. But that's just begging the question. Let's lay it bare. And you can start off with this, guys. The fact that it's a category error, you're confusing different with disconnected because material and immaterial are categories and not barriers. Philosophers have long acknowledged that things in different categories can relate. For example, numbers that are abstract, immaterial concepts, but they govern physics, engineering, and every measurable law in the universe. But they're abstract. Numbers are abstract and they're immaterial. You can't see them, but you know they govern everything that we know as important, whether it be chemistry, physics, biology, anatomy, engineering. Every measurable law comes down to the most basic abstract numbers. So essentially what this kid was saying was that math isn't real because it's immaterial. It's immaterial. It doesn't matter. How could it interact with the material universe? But we know that it does every single day. Logic also, guys, is immaterial. You can't weigh logic. You cannot measure logic. But at the end of the day, you're using it right now every single time you try to argue with somebody. So clearly the immaterial can shape how the material behaves, right? Every single day, the immaterial shapes my love for my wife is immaterial. I cannot tangibly show my wife love, but I can through action show her that I love her. Therefore, my love, something immaterial being governed into a material action.